All right, so how's it going so far? Right, how about like thumbs up or thumbs sideways, thumbs down, okay, thumbs up, okay, looks like we're doing okay. A little quick visual evaluation there. So I want to introduce our next guest speaker. So Mike Osterling, we go back several years, I guess, and I forget exactly how we first connected, and I think I said this last time I introduced you at a summit.
Somebody asked me that this morning, and I couldn't remember.
But Mike came and talked to one of my MBA classes. I teach an MBA class in lean operations management. I decided several years ago, as opposed to teaching them the same old stuff that doesn't work, we would start teaching them stuff that actually does work and makes things better for people and organizations. So Mike came by, and we were struggling with A3s, and he sort of straightened out my class a little bit, straightened out me a little bit, because he's got a lot of great practical experience. And we had him last year here. He was talking to this same summit group, and we were talking about Kaizen and Kaizen events. But this time I said, all right, Mike, I need some more help on A3s. And so I asked him to come, and here he is, and I'll let him tell a little bit more about himself. But Mike Osterling.
Great. Thanks, Eric. Good to be here. Thanks for the opportunity. So, show of hands, how many folks first time here? Wow, good job, Eric. Way to pull in a new crowd. That's good. That's good. My name is Mike Osterling. I'm an independent consultant. I've been out there for about a dozen years. Before that, I was working for a big manufacturer called Square D Company, manufacture electrical distribution equipment and stuff like that. We started playing with this lean stuff back in the mid-90s, and I was lucky enough to be focused or spending a lot of time in one of the 2 or 3 plants out of 35 in North America that was doing this stuff. So it was kind of fun. It was kind of a learning lab, and it's been a journey. It's kind of depressing to say how many years I've been doing this stuff, because that's a sign of age, I guess. But it's been a journey of many years, and it continues to be a journey of learning. And it's kind of cool because, Eric, when you talk about we did Kaizen events last year, and that's a problem-solving approach, right? And it's a certain tool or methodology for going after a certain type of a problem. And actually, Shelley was great. 79, I had no idea, and it's really even scarier to think that maybe there's 100 or more. But A3s are another one of those techniques or methodologies, and I very much subscribe to your observation that we don't need to understand them all. We need to understand which. It's a good idea to have an idea what the different tools are, but then the important thing is to understand when is the right time to apply the different tools. So what we're going to talk about today, and actually before we do that, and I've got, I do want to ask you guys one more question, and I'll be asking more. I'm like Shelley. I like to make you guys work as opposed to having to do all the work myself. So I know there's 134 or something like that paid at the gate here, okay, to come in. So I'm looking for 134 hands in total. So I'd like to get a poll of the audience, if you will. Roughly, I'm going to ask you to answer one and only one of these 4 questions. Never heard of A3s. You're aware of them. You have a little bit of knowledge about what A3s are, but you haven't really practiced or haven't put them to use. That's our 3rd category, would be practitioner. 4th category would be you have coached people through an A3 problem-solving process. So, show of hands, how many folks have never even heard of this other than knowing their numbers and their alphabets? Okay, so that's about a third, about a fourth of the audience. Aware of A3s but haven't practiced? Okay, that's close to half. Practitioner, you've actually pulled some A3s together, less than a quarter, and coached. Okay, so we're probably somewhere around, just to give us a feel, maybe 25%, about 50%, and these two together another 25%. So this was what makes it all fun. We got folks that don't know anything and folks that are probably smarter at this than I am, okay? So we'll do this together. So what I'd like to do together is give you an overview of what this A3 problem solving is, just an orientation to it. We'll talk a little bit about A3s as a problem-solving methodology, and I think a big thing that the folks down in this group understand, but a lot of us, well, I didn't understand this years ago, but how we can use A3s as a really, really effective way to manage folks and to develop thinking problem solvers. We'll talk about how A3 problem solving is different than the way that A lot of us were raised, I'm not blaming my folks here, I'm blaming my bosses, I'm blaming my business schools. And we'll talk about different benefits of the A3 approach. So we'll go back and forth, try to make this interactive, show you some examples. I've got some slides up here. I'm the kind of guy that I put together too many slides and then I don't read them all. So I know what death by PowerPoint is. I like to have more of a dialogue and conversation. This will be posted as a PDF so you can look back at it, and a lot of these bullets are here as a reminder, not necessarily as things I'm going to read off to you. So before we get rolling, we say A3 is a problem-solving methodology. It's a problem-solving approach. So before we even talk about A3 as a problem-solving methodology, what is a problem? What does that mean when somebody says, I have a problem? Yes, sir?
Things aren't going the way you want them to.
Not going the way we want them to. Okay? Somebody else. There's a smart group. You get to prove your intelligence here. Keep going. Somebody says I have a problem. How do you know if you have a problem? There's a defect of some sort. Okay? Not going the way we want it to. What else? I heard somebody else trying to say something. Obstacles to success. Not meeting expectations. How do we know if we have a problem? What's that? Complaints. Starting to get closer there. Shelley was really driving this whole thing when she's talking about metrics. Okay? Data. Information. It's really hard to, so a key element of defining whether or not we have a problem, and this sounds so basic, losing customers, and now we can put some metrics on that perhaps, okay? Defects, we can put some metrics on that. Cost overruns, we can put some metrics on that. But we can't say we have a problem. We can't know if we have a problem. We can't know if we're addressing or improving or fixing, I'll use the word, a problem if we don't have metrics around it. So there needs to be some type of objective thing. If I say we have a problem and I don't have, and it's my opinion, and Sean's got an opinion, and Mark's got an opinion, and Denise have an opinion, we all have an opinion on whether or not we have a problem, who's right? Me. Yeah, exactly. That's the right answer, is me. Okay? Either the person at the highest level, okay, but even that doesn't necessarily convince everybody that we have a problem. But until we get into data, we're dealing with opinions, and as long as we're dealing with opinions, it's a silly battle. They're silly conversations. So, how can you tell if your organization has good problem-solving skills, I'll say, or what are some of the traits of good problem-solving? And I'm going to key off of Shelley here. I'm going to ask you guys to just pair off small groups, 2, 3, 4 people, and talk about what would you look for? How would you know if your organization has good problem-solving skills? All right. So call them out. What are some of the attributes, traits? How do you know if your organization has good problem-solving skills? There's no problems. Now, what that could be is an indication of, that could be back to that denial thing, right?
They've implemented a system for tracking.
Okay, so there's a system for tracking. Great. Happy customers. I was going to say that could probably be internal and external, right? So customers and employees. Give me another one. Yes? So you're seeing that KPI objective is being met. Is that okay? Good? Matt? Measuring what's important. Eric?
I would say transparency within a group that's collaborating.
Transparency of what? This is good. Transparency of what?
Just, I guess, it is kind of what I'm thinking about is being more open and honest about a situation.
Good, good. So you can actually see the problems. And probably, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but perhaps transparency and what you're learning as you go through the problem-solving process. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't tell the presenter, no. Leroy. Beautiful. Problems don't reoccur, which is related to the KPI objective met, but it's important enough that problems don't reoccur. One more. Yes, sir. No blame culture. You got to do it, huh? Ah, thank you. Thanks for pointing that. KPI is key performance indicator. So thank you very much. And I'm sure we could fill up another flip chart and perhaps 2 more pages with different indications that we've got a good problem-solving culture. Now, I'm going to ask you guys to reflect on your own operations. Actually, I'm going to say one more thing, and it kind of ties into this no-blame culture, but it's a mindset inside that organization. I think this is really important, that every problem, or that every, looks like a problem. We need to treat problems as nuggets of gold. Problems are opportunities. Okay, I know this was tongue-in-cheek. Was it, Terry, where you said no problems? Okay, that's either denial or, boy, we're really, really good. But I think most of us would agree that we're surrounded by hundreds of problems. And I look back in the early parts of my career, and when people came to me with problems, I know my body language and probably my verbal response was not one that was receptive to learning or to knowing that there are problems. I mean, it's arms crossed, shoulders down, move away from the desk. And by the way, they're on the other side of the desk, right? So there's just all kinds of barriers of communication, barriers to even, there was no interest, the way I used to manage, there was no reason for folks to bring problems to me because it wasn't necessarily a pleasant experience. So, good problem-solving environment, problems are treated as nuggets of gold. If we don't know about the problem, how can we go after dealing with it? So, I'm going to make you guys work again. 2 questions for you, okay? Think about your own organization. And again, if you're a student or something like that, pair up with somebody who's, think about a past job experience, or pair up with somebody who's in a working environment. How would you rate the effectiveness of problem solving in your organization? Kind of maybe some of these are some of the things you might want to take into account. And then after you answer that on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 is really good, 1 is the other end of 10. And the second question for you is, what do you think it would take, again, maybe reference this list, or maybe there's some other things that you've got in mind, what would it take to move you 2 points? So we're just going to take, I'm going to give you 5 minutes to think through this one. Five, that's cool. No root cause, we didn't even mention that, good. Changing culture to identify problems. I'm looking over your shoulders without permission, sorry. Where'd you put yourselves?
We didn't write it down. I said
No evidence?
I said a 4 and he said that was too much.
What are some of the gaps?
We were just talking about the culture of
Culture of blame. What'd you guys have for a score?
My first
No. I gotta change my graph.
This is silent disclosure.
What are some of the big things that are missing? If you did a Pareto, 1 or 2.
Yeah, I think it always sort of boils down to culture, people accepting problems as opportunities instead of something to sweep under the rug.
Yeah.
You know?
Good.
We're going to score you.
And I'm lurking in the back. Can't hide from me in the back, you guys. What'd you guys have for a score? You're looking for negatives. You're not even the first ones who said that. All right, you guys hang out together. I can tell. Nothing gets by me. What'd you give yourselves? A 3. What are some of the gaps? Yeah. Uh-huh, uh-huh. Oh yeah, we all got opinions. All right. Time's up, pencils down. So I can't tell you how many times I've asked this question with big groups. It's dozens. And this is the most honest group that I've had. Because I asked a couple people where they were, and there were 2 different groups that said, we're not on that scale. We're off the chart. But they were off the chart to the left, down in the negative range, not in the 11, 12 range. So just show of hands, I'm not there. Turn off the video recorders. We don't want any recordings here. Folks who 2 or below, show of hands, okay? Not, those are all little meek hands. 3 and 4, okay, that's kind of typical. 5, 6, 7, 8. 9, 10. And the really cool thing is it's this weird thing about zealots like ourselves. We'd never score ourselves above a 6 on anything, because the more we learn, the more opportunities we see. So this is a pretty honest group on both sides. Got folks down here on the scale, and we didn't have hardly anybody up here. So just call out, what are some of the things that we're missing? I know there's other stuff that we didn't talk about here, because you guys shared them with, some of you guys shared them with me. Empowerment of employees to do what? Okay. Uh-huh. So one aspect of empowerment, I think I hear you saying, is inclusion or involvement in that problem-solving process. Good. Yes, Stacy.
Management support.
Okay, so management support, that has to be up here somewhere, but management support. Oh, by the way, as a facilitator up here, spelling doesn't count, okay? And neither does handwriting, obviously. Yes, sir. Problem recognition, okay? And so when you say that's a problem or that's the gap. Okay, recognizing a problem for what it is, okay? Recognizing the problem. So we'll wrap it in. It's a different aspect, but it's the right people solving the problem. Good, good, good. I thought I saw one more hand. Yes, sir. A structured problem solving approach, or lack of one, huh? Or that's what's keeping you. Structured PS, structured problem solving approach. And again, there's more and more that could go on this list, right? So here's what we see, and it's a lot of this stuff here. Traditional problem solving approach. Again, where I was raised, I blanked that out. The work environment that I was raised in, we didn't talk about. Work environment that I was raised in, managers, supervisors, maybe some key staff people are the ones who are out there fixing all the problems. We're identifying the problems and we're fixing the problems. I did that on purpose. I made everybody look at me. It's a kindergarten trick that I learned from my 1, 2, 3, eyes on me. I've got 2 boys, sorry. So, but the deal is, I mean, the mindset was, we've got 1, 2, 3, I should say, 5, 10, 15% of the workforce are the folks that should be fixing the problems, and they're the problem-solving experts. And so we talk about inclusion, that's an issue. And when we go through problem solving, we assign a problem to one person. We say, go fix this problem. And we encourage, directly or indirectly, that person goes after and solves that problem individually, as an individual. And we're not really encouraging or reinforcing. We don't even know how to get these folks to engage with other people. So the problems that we're seeing are problem-solving processes planned and executed by one person from beginning to end. There's an over-reliance on indirect observation, over-reliance on data. Not to say data is not important, but we sit at our desk and we come up with solutions instead of going to Gemba, instead of going out there and seeing what's really going on. Actually, I don't know if any of you guys can relate to this, but perhaps this sounds familiar. This would be somewhere else, not where you work now, somewhere else. Okay. Show up to a meeting with a department manager or higher. You're all sitting there, meeting's not quite underway, people are kind of milling in. Manager goes, I just got off the phone with customer XYZ, they're really ticked off. They got this and they were supposed to get that. You guys are killing me. And one person says, oh, I know why that happens. That happened a couple weeks ago too. Then somebody else says, oh, I know how to take care of that. We just need to do X, Y, Z. And then I say as the manager, great, get on it. And let me know tomorrow that it's taken care of. Does this sound familiar? Problem solving in a meeting room? Problem solving around a conference room? Or around a conference table? I mean, this is what we do. And there's so many things that we're missing. And the really cool thing when we get into the meat of the A3 is it helps us walk through and understand what's missing. We've all heard PDCA, right? And we've heard PDCA, Plan, Do, Check, Act. We've heard this, and it's this cycle of continuous improvement and Deming and Short and all of that stuff. It's good stuff, but nobody taught us how to do it. They just said do PDCA. And there's no method for doing it. Those 4 letters don't help me understand really how to do it. And the weird thing is, I had coffee this morning with an industrial engineering student here this morning. It's a boyfriend of a family friend. And it was really interesting talking to Garrett because he said, you know, we're working on these projects and they won't let us proceed with just one solution. They're making us come up with 3 solutions and they won't even let us talk about solutions until we're halfway through the project. I was like, this is beautiful stuff. This is great stuff. But how come in the workplace we don't do that? We don't. We do, but it's a minority of organizations that do that. So we've got to go back to the basics. My boys, so now they're teenagers, they're 16 and 18 years old, and they've been surrounding me with this lean stuff since they've been born, and I really feel sorry for them. But I asked them, I'll never forget, I asked them in 5th or 6th grade, I said, have you guys learned the scientific method? Has that been taught to you in school? And my youngest son, Sean, who was in 5th grade at that point in time, said, we learned it in 3rd grade, we learned it in 4th grade, and we're covering it again this year in 5th grade. It's like, wow, that's great! But we've been doing this for decades. And we get in a work environment and we forget what we're supposed to do. Because I got a problem, I know why we got the problem, I can fix it. Good, go do it. So I know we talk about this being leadership stuff, but it can't all go on leadership. We've got to take on some of this stuff as individuals, as engineers, as supervisors, as managers. We've got to start driving that behavior, and we've got to teach and coach people through that problem-solving process. So I diverge. So, over-reliance on indirect observation. We're not getting out to Gemba. Gemba is a Japanese word. I think it's the only one I use in here, but it's a Japanese word for the real place. Get out there and see what's really going on. We jump to a single solution. I know why that's happening. Long, long, long before we even understand what's causing the problem. And we're really bad at analyzing what's going on. We can talk it to death, but it doesn't mean that we understand what's really happening. So, traditional problem solving. A couple more things to keep your eyes open for. If anybody approves it, it goes up to the manager. Engineer's working on it, or whoever's problem solver is working on this thing, and if they need buy-in and approval, they go up, which is probably the wrong way, right? It just goes 1 or 2 or 3 steps further away from where the problem is. So we need to engage. We should probably be going down for approval and buy-in. And then, we all have lived this thing, we go through this long project of fixing this problem, and we go to implementation, and we get so much pushback, we're pulling our hair out. And it's driving us crazy. And we don't understand why. Well, it's obvious that, they don't want to do what the right thing is to do. Well, boy, we just came out of left field. Where'd this thing come from? So, and then the big thing is we see different approaches to problem solving with different people. So we don't have a system. In reality, we know where we're at. We've got an idea where we want to go. We've got some type of measure, whether it's a key performance indicator or we want to cut defects or whatever that thing is. We know where we're at, we know where we're going, but we don't know what's in between. And in fact, I'm going to say at that point in time, this is something that I borrowed from a guy, Mike Rother. He talks about this cloud of uncertainty. Current condition, target condition, and there's this cloud of unknown in the middle. And we don't know what the right path is until we start heading into that cloud. Because it may not be a straight line. And what we thought that path was going to look like when we go into the problem solving, when we start digging into this, may not be what the path may be very, very different than what we anticipated up front. So it's all part of this plan, do, study, adjust, or plan, do, check, act cycle. And I think, like I said earlier, that A3s are a really good way to guide us through that PDCA or PDSA cycle. So what's A3? It's a structured approach for getting through PDSA. It's a mechanism for coaching and mentoring teams through this stuff. It helps us visualize the problem solver or the problem owner's thought process. And I'm going to show you some examples. I'm going to hand out some examples so you can kind of see this yourself. And it's a document that morphs with time. As we go through the steps, we actually may have to backtrack because we learn different things, or what we learn at step 3 or 4 may force us to go back to step 1 or 2 and say, did we say this right? Is this really the problem? What have we learned? So it's very much it's not a defined path. It is that weird thing going through the cloud. And most important of all, A3 stands for an international piece of paper roughly the size of 11 by 17 piece of paper. Everybody's like, what's A3? What's A3? It's the size of a piece of paper. So the idea behind using and calling it an A3 is to get people to think, how do we distill this thing down into one piece of paper as opposed to a 30-page report that nobody's going to read. In fact, we're lucky if people will read a one-page written report with the amount of information that we're being bombarded with. So how do we make this appealing? How do we distill it down to the critical information? And how do we get people to actually try to digest it? So when we talk about A3s, there's different types of A3s. And just to clarify that I'm only talking about one today, there's planning A3s, kind of strategic level A3s. There's a great book out there called Getting the Right Things Done by Pascal Dennis. It talks about mother A3s, spawning baby A3s. We're not talking, and it's really cool. It's good stuff. And then there's status report A3s, so it might kind of be where we at. Sometimes we'll do A3s after a Kaizen event or something like that. It's a one-page summary. There's proposal A3s. We did a really cool A3 on new plant expansion, or actually with the A3. The problem was they needed to absorb a whole bunch of product lines, and so how do they do it in the existing footprint? And so we did a proposal A3. That's pretty cool. And there's problem-solving A3s, and that's what we're talking about here. So we could succinctly, and actually, Eric, if you could hand out that first one, I'm going to give you a copy of this that's got kind of the details behind it. But we could think of the A3 as basically having 8 parts. We've got a theme, and I'm going to go into each section of these a little bit. Got a theme, we've got a problem. The problem is talking about why is this even important? What's the business need? What's the current condition? This is a really fun part of the A3 because we start with this big problem, and maybe it's such a complex problem that we can't fix the whole thing. We've got on-time delivery issues. We're not going to go out there with one project and fix on-time delivery issues. We need to break this thing down into manageable chunks and start understanding what those different chunks of our service level issues are. Where are we trying to go? Which is kind of interesting. We didn't set the objective up front because we don't know what chunk we're going after. We're taking a big problem. We're going to break it down into a manageable chunk. And now we're going to set a goal for that manageable chunk. I didn't say this to begin with, but it's important to recognize that A3s take time, they take energy, they take a lot of conversations. They typically take a fair amount of data analysis or some type of data analysis, I'll just call it. They take a fair amount of analysis. And so not everything should have an A3. Kaizen events, simpler problems, process problems. The door won't close. I don't even need a Kaizen event for that. Let's go over there and do some quick experiments and figure out why the door won't close. We don't need an A3. So right tool for the right type of application or right type of situation. So the fifth part is where we get into analysis. Might be process analysis, might be root cause analysis. Then we get into countermeasures. We're going to talk about this word countermeasures. And we get into making sure this thing worked and where do we go next. So now that I've given you something to distract you away from looking at me, I'm going to change slides on you. In fact, I'm going to give you something else to distract you with. And I'm going to hand out this other a big A3. Yeah. It's kind of a sanitized A3. Every A3 that I've seen has been a bit different. If you take half of them. All right. Thanks. It's much more interesting to look at this than it is to look at a slide. There's three. There's some more. So one thing to think about A3s, I mean, the sections that I've got on here, great, wonderful. They're pretty common to have these sections. I'm giving you extras, I'm sure. I'll pick them up in a minute. Don't get really hung up on it's got to have these 8 components. What's important is that you've got a logical flow that takes you through the problem-solving process. So these 8 sections, they work great for some problems. I've seen some awesome A3s that only have 5 sections on them. And they take us through the problem-solving process. There's 5, I think. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There you go, guys. Extras? Okay. Yeah. Thanks a lot. I can help you out. Thanks. Thanks. If there's anybody, if you can just see if anybody's missing. If you didn't get one, raise your hand. But I'm going to walk you through this. I'm not going to try to make you an expert on this, but I want you guys, I want to use this kind of as an example of walking through a problem or walking through a problem-solving process. So we started out with a theme, which we're going to, and we'll come back and talk about this a little more. The theme that we're going to talk about here is it's everybody's got an A3, right? Except for the guy up front. And I need my glasses. I'll get another one of these coming. I'll break my neck if I'm looking up there. So, on-time payment of invoices. Doesn't mean that that's what we're going to fix in this round of A3 problem solving, or in this round of problem solving, but this is what some folks would call, for this process, that's true north. We want to pay all of our invoices on time. The next section of this is talking about, okay, that's great, that's wonderful, how are we doing today? So it says at least once a month we're on credit hold due to late payments. Sounds like a problem. It's quantitative. February 2012, $900,000 of invoices were paid late due to discrepancies. It's data rich. Sounds like a problem. In May 2012, we had 101 past due invoices, and there was $150,000 of raw material on hand more than 90 days and hasn't been paid for. How do you argue, if we're trying to tell people there's a problem, how do you say that's not a problem? And they might not. They might say that's not a problem. That's not a big enough thing. But let's sort this thing out up front as far as, is there a problem, yes or no? Here's the data. If you don't agree with the data, show me a good data source, show me a different data source, and let's get agreement on what's going on. Maybe that's good, maybe that's bad, that's where we're at today. This team pulled that together and they said, we got a problem. And they could communicate with the leadership team. That's a problem. It's worth working on. One of the best A3s I worked on was actually, this goes back a couple years as well, working with a company, 800 employees, and I had a handful of teams I was running through A3 learning, if you will. And the controller had a problem that she thought we should be going after. And it sounded like a good problem. She called it lost assets. And what she was talking about was when people left the company, they had something like 10% turnover a year, something like that. So that's 80, 100 people a year, which means average tenure is 10 years. So that's actually pretty good retention. So the problem was when people left the company, they were losing laptops, they were losing cell phones, they were losing credentials. Sounds like important stuff. So the team was, this is a great A3. Team went out there, they said, okay, what's our theme? Worked on a theme. What's the data? How are we doing? And they pulled together the data for the last 3 years, pretty good sample, and they found out in the last 3 years they'd lost 1 laptop. That was it. Is that a problem? Probably not. Relative to everything else that's going on in this company and in the finance department, losing 1 laptop in 3 years probably isn't that big of an issue. A3 completed. Beautiful, one of the best A3s I've ever worked on. Because traditionally, what would have happened? Controller would have assigned one person, and she would have said, Mike, go out there, write a procedure, make sure you roll it out with security, make sure you roll it out with HR, make sure you roll it out with these guys, and we've got to make sure that we're following this process for everybody, right? And people wonder how, you're talking about the 8 waste and wasted and all of that, people wonder how all of these things just kind of migrate into our processes. There it is, baby. It's operating in a vacuum. So, before we proceed, we haven't talked about solutions to this yet, have we? Because we don't even know if there's a problem. Now we know there's a problem, but we still can't talk about solutions because this is too big of a thing. In fact, this is a shared services group, which means they're providing financial services, including accounts payable, for about 4 different divisions of a company. And so this is a big thing. So they got to break this thing down so they can get their arms around it. And I'm going to talk about this piece of it in a few minutes, and I'm going to blow it up and talk through it. But let's break this problem down into smaller chunks. Once we've broken the problem down, now we can start doing root cause analysis. Now we can start understanding, I've got this manageable chunk, how do I go after that? And now only after we understand causes can we look at, is there something we can do about this? Not until now can we start looking at countermeasures. And then finally we talk about implementation plan and how do we confirm that it actually worked. So I'm going to hit some of this. I'm not going to go through all the details of this. But this is, I like this because I like cartoons. I'll actually read this. And this could be buried in a report. I've written these reports, right? They're 10 pages or whatever, and it doesn't mean that we really understand what's going on. So let's keep moving forward. So what we're trying to do with the A3 is we're trying to visualize the problem-solving process, that we're trying to visualize the logical steps that the team or the problem solver is making. It's a fantastic tool. Oh, by the way, you don't go off and write an A3. When you go through this process for complex problems, I already said it, hey, before we go past the problem, we got to get buy-in that there's even a problem. And then once we get buy-in that, yes, there's a problem, we say, let's break this thing down. And once we've broken it down, which is probably the hardest part for me, probably the hardest part is breaking the problem down into figuring out what the patterns or subsets are. Once we've broken that down into these manageable chunks, we need to get agreement from the process owners, from the stakeholders, from the involved parties that this is the right chunk to be going after and that the data that we've collected is actually accurate. So don't tell somebody to go off and write an A3 and expect an A3 in 3 hours. If it's a summary report of a Kaizen event and you want an A3 in 3 hours, that's cool because it's a report card. It's a history report of what already happened. But A3s as problem-solving tools are not a history report until the whole thing is done, right? A3 reports for problem-solving, or I should say A3 thinking for problem-solving, evolves over, I've had people, I don't know what the right number is, I've had people say if you think it's going to take more than 3 or 4 weeks to get this thing figured out, you should probably do an A3. That's a guideline, that's not a rule, but that's where we're talking about the complexity of the problem. Make sure the tool fits the complexity of the problem. So, what we do with an A3 is somebody becomes the problem expert. We've got a coach that's supporting that person. We're talking to the folks. We're engaging the people at each of the different steps. If it's a 5-step or an 8-step, however many steps we want it to be, we're engaging people at each way. We're using the data to take us away from opinions and subjectivity. We're using the data to buy drive-in. Again, people don't like the data that's there. They say, okay, what's the right source of data? What are the right numbers? Where are you getting it from? And big, big, big emphasis on Socratic coaching. What do I mean when I say Socratic coaching? Ask questions. What was that? Ask questions. So we're not telling people answers. Where'd you get the data from? Who have you talked to? It's not, did you talk to this person, that person, and that person? Did you think about doing this? That's not Socratic coaching. That's leading the witness. Socratic coaching is asking, who did you engage with? Where did you get this information with? How do you know that? What do you think the next steps are? That's Socratic coaching. It's tough to do. It takes more time. It takes more energy. But it takes us down the right path. And it creates buy-in and ownership and deep understanding by the folks that are working on the problem. By the way, it takes away the excuse of when something doesn't work and somebody says, well, why'd you do it that way? And they say, well, Mike told me to. You can't say that. You can say, I did it that way because this is what I was thinking. That's cool. That's all right. We weren't thinking, we've learned something since then. Maybe we need to modify our thinking. That's all right. Let's not beat people up with A3s. Let's use it to help develop them. So, good A3s are data rich. I told you I've got 2 sons. They're 16 and 18 years old. This is last week. I overheard my son on the phone with one of his buddies. I just heard half of this conversation, but I learned the rest of it after the conversation because we were trying to figure out what he was up to and trying to figure out what our family schedule was that afternoon. And he was on the phone. He was talking to his buddy at the DMV, and his buddy was supposed to come and pick him up and give him a ride somewhere. We were trying to figure out who was giving him a ride or whatever. And his buddy told, my son Ryan said, so how long are you going to be there? He goes, oh man, the line's really long at the DMV. It's like, so the line's really long. I'll be there when I finish up. The line at the DMV is really long. So take 30 seconds, okay, and share with your neighbor how long, for you, how long is long at the DMV? Just think about this for 30 seconds. And make us do our exercises again, okay? Just one arm at a time. But I broke this down into 15-minute chunks. And if you said in your mind this was long at the DMV, raise your hand. I'll get a rough count. 0 to 15 minutes is a long time at the DMV. We've got 4. Boy, you guys live in good places. We got a real small population there. Okay, 15 to 30 minutes. Long at the DMV. 5, 10, 15, 20. I'm going to say it's about 25 or so. 30 to 45 minutes is long at the DMV. Interesting. Ooh. 45 to 60 minutes. we're probably back up in that 25 range somewhere. Longer than 60 minutes is long at the DMV. Okay, so how long do you think my son thought it would be until his friend was going to be there? Oh, he doesn't even think about it. It's just like, he's going to be here. It wasn't important to him. But that's the question. I mean, how long is long? And this, I stole this phrase, if you will, or this quote, this descriptor for this type of stuff from another guy that I teach at SDSU with, Sammy Obara, and he talks about junk words. Long line at the DMV is a junk word. How do you quantify, I didn't give you this, how do you quantify a long line? You can't. And different people are going to respond differently when they hear a junk word. It's going to be 10, 15 minutes, or it's going to be more than an hour. And that's going to take us in different directions. Is that a problem? Hey, if the longest line at the DMV is 10 minutes, maybe that's not a problem. If the customer wait at the DMV is 60 minutes or longer, maybe that's a problem. So, big rule in A3s is no junk words. Don't take this to the extreme. Sometimes we have to put qualitative data there, okay? But the driving push, if you will, is we've got to have data. We've got to have numbers. We've got to be able to measure and know if we fixed the problem or if we improved the situation or not. So I love junk words. And you listen to our conversations, and they're full of junk words. And that's okay as a starting point. But sometimes we need to respectfully challenge folks when we start making decisions based on junk words. We're always shipping late at the end of the month. Really? What does that mean? What's the end of the month? So, themes, true north. Okay? This is ultimate goal. What are we trying to do related to this issue? Okay? And we need to be careful as we go through the different pieces of the A3, including the theme, or I should say starting with the theme and going into the problem statement, is that we stay away from phrases, we stay away from wording that indicates cause, or they may be prescriptive in nature. So, as a theme, we need to have better call center training. That goes back to what you had, Shelley. You had something very similar to this. I mean, this is telling us what the solution is before we even know what the problem is. And contrast that to 100% first call resolution. Two very different things. Two very different things. Maybe it's a training issue. I don't know. We don't even know what the cause is for non-100% first call resolution. You guys see this? And it's really, it's all over. We're very, very good at, again, I work with teams, and I work with teams that have gone through this a whole bunch of times, and they're writing problem statements or themes, and you'll see caused by or resulting in. You'll see all these little clues that people in their mind are actually taking themselves in a certain direction. 100%, I should say, better call center training. Hey, if my boss says better call center training, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to do better call center training because I'm going to keep my boss happy. Eliminate, what's wrong with this? Eliminate assembly errors due to operator inattention. It's incredibly causal. Or improve weld fixturing to reduce defects. Incredibly, I mean, that's almost prescriptive. It says, hey, there's the answer. We need to have good fixturing. Well, maybe that's the answer. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's materials related. I don't know. Maybe it's parameter related. Who knows? All right, making you work again. I'm going to make you practice. I want you to draft a theme statement. I'm not even going to give you 5 minutes, but I'm going to give you a couple minutes. Draft a theme statement for the DMV for an A3 that's focused on reducing wait times at the DMV. All right, so again, work with your groups of 2 or 3 and come up with a theme statement. Make it succinct. Think true north, not causal, not prescriptive. Anybody brave enough? Anybody got? Okay, Jesse?
Reduce average wait time by 25% of registration.
Okay, so reduce average wait time by 25%. Yes, sir, Max.
Yeah, all customer service in 15 minutes or less or their money back.
All customers serviced within 15 minutes or less, or their money back. All right? Brian?
Just simply that, DMV customer service processing.
Okay, DMV customer service processing. Any others? Give me some more. I had 130 people working here. Paul?
No customer waits too long as defined by the customer.
No customer waits too long as defined by the customer. So I think we're getting a little closer to true north here. All of these are good statements. I think some of them are actually targets. I think some of them are problem statements, almost. They smell or just a little bit of problem statements. But true north is actually, go back to the one that I gave you, all invoices paid on time. That's true north. Not saying that's what we're going to get in our first round of problem solving, but that's true north. Yes?
Going with the previous presenter, reduce the time a person waits from arrival to service, investment.
Okay, and that's a good target. When we get down to setting the target, and it may even be more specific than that. So hold on to that, because I'm not saying that that's bad. It becomes, that needs to be part of the A3, but it's almost too soon. The theme is the theme is intended to be pretty high level. Matt?
Customer service perceives perception is good.
Okay, and we're getting, and that's a theme. Okay? You guys see, kind of starting to see the difference and differentiate between, it's not necessarily the target, it's where we want to go. True north is that thing, and we may never get there. No lines at the DMV. That's a true north. Or zero wait at the DMV. Or something like that. That's true north. Will we ever get there? I don't know. There might be a whole bunch of things that support that, but that's kind of the direction. That's our ultimate OBJ objective. So good A3s are visual. I'm not giving you this one, okay? But good A3s are visual. And what? 2/3 of that is pictures. And it's wonderful because it forces us to distill the information down and into I'll say a format that we can actually analyze. So good A3s are visual. I like this one. This is our last handout. I'll take half of those. This is actually out of Time magazine about 2 years ago, and this has got nothing to do with A3s other than good A3. Visuals force us to distill information. So what this is showing you guys is the tax rates, 4 different tax rates in all 50 states. And what it's showing us is the further out on that radar chart, if you want to call it that, that's the higher the tax rate is. So if we look at the top, very top left one, it's New Jersey. Can I get somebody to give me a hand? One of these students here. Thanks a lot, man. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. So what this shows in the very top left, it says New Jersey, property state is the 49th highest, sales is the 46th highest, individual is 48th highest, and corporate taxes are 39th highest. If we're only talking about taxes, I don't want to live in New Jersey. Okay? I actually lived in Jersey for about 5-6 years. I like Jersey. But if we're only talking about taxes, we don't want to live in Jersey. So where do you want to live? I mean, there's a couple sweet ones in there, isn't there? Indiana's looking good. Alaska's looking good. This is a really cool. Montana looks great. This is a really. Oh, how's California look? There's a lot of red in California, huh? Who's got it easy in California? Property tax. So, but we can figure this out like that. I mean, this is a super graphic, if you ask me. This is a super visual. We could have all that information in a table, but could we digest it? Could we analyze it? It'd be really, really hard to distill that down to, look at this. We have 50 states, 4 parameters on each state. So we got 200 pieces of data. And several of you, like that, said this is where I'd want to live if taxes were the only consideration. This is a cool graphic. So, again, graphics force that distillation, if you will, of information. So when we get into problem statements, now we're talking about why is this thing important? Why is it important to the business? What's QCDSM stand for? Quality, cost, delivery, safety, and morale. So if we're looking at metrics, delivery is the same thing as service or includes service. So if we're looking at what is it that we want to improve, maybe it falls within one of those 5 different quality, cost, delivery, safety, or morale areas. Okay? And again, it's measurable. And again, I'm going to keep saying this, we've got to get buy-in at each step of the A3. So here's a visual problem statement. What do we got? In top right is the summary of it. 9 major projects. So this is just the problem statement. The theme is not included here. But this is showing 9 major projects, new product developments tracked over the last 2 years. 8 of the 9 showed significant overrun in time. If you didn't have this graphic, significant overrun in time doesn't mean anything, right? That's junk data. But if I've got it as a bullet and I've got some data off to the side, that's cool. Net of 2,000 engineering hours more than planned over those 2 years. Maybe that's a big problem, maybe it's not. If I've only got 1 engineer, that's a big problem. If I got 50 engineers, maybe it's not that big of a problem. We're talking about half of a full-time employee. So, and there's my graphics. Blue is estimated, top left. Blue is estimated, red is actual. Here's the 9 different projects. We had project number 2 that actually, you can see the green down below, it came ahead of schedule. Woohoo! Okay, the red shows the actual. And we can see right there that 8 out of 9 projects were past due. These are in calendar days. And so you can see projects, first project there was due in 350 days, 1 year. It came through at 600 days. All right, make your work again. Do the groundwork for a problem statement with a theme, 0 wait time at the DMV. So that's our true north is 0 wait time at the DMV. And I'm only going to give you 4 minutes or so, but think about what high-level data would you want to collect? So this is high level. What data would you need to collect in order to start putting together a problem statement? And if you have time, think about some ways that you might visually represent that data. What are the wait times? And again, so I'm not saying what you guys were saying is wrong, but lots of times we'll start and we'll say, okay, what's the big problem? We don't even know what the big problem, we don't even know if there's a big problem yet. So instead of getting into this just crazy analysis type thing, yeah, let's look at the average wait times. Would be, right, and then we'll drill down, and that's going to be breaking the problem down. And again, not critiquing, but yeah.
And then you can go there, and then you can go, well, what's happening during that time? Is it variety? Is it volume?
And one suggestion, if I'm butting in 2/3 of the way through your conversation, but I'm not an expert. I've just played around a little and made all kinds of mistakes. You have one of the big one. Yeah. So one thing up here, maybe an approach with a problem statement, lots of times we'll just start out really high level. And then what you guys are talking about here, breaking it down, looking at peaks, looking at whatever it is, that usually comes into the next step where we break the problem down. So we'll start out and see if there's even really a problem. Hey, people are complaining about long wait times. People are complaining about lost assets. I've only lost 1 computer. Before we start figuring out what department and how much was it and all of that stuff. What's that? Yeah, exactly. Is it even worth our time? All right. Can you some examples of information that you'd want to collect, data that you'd want to collect to figure out, do you even have a problem? You're dying to say something, Alex.
All I can think of is how long somebody has to wait to get to the front of the line to get served.
How long? Okay, so what's the data you need? A whole bunch, yeah, a whole bunch of samples, right? But what are some experiences? Anything else? Are there peak periods? So this is going to be important information.
Geographic data.
Some geographic data. Now this one I think I set up as, it's on another slide later on. This is a specific DMV. So sorry, I didn't set that up right, but this is a DMV location AAA or something like that. But if we were looking at the whole state, then at some point in time, we're going to have to start breaking it down like that. So breaking it down into patterns, subsets, manageable chunks. Would we need to know our capacity? As we go through the problem-solving process, absolutely we'll need to know that. It's a little bit early, because what that starts bleeding into is analysis. Okay? And we don't know which part of the problem we're going after yet. So this is important stuff, but all in good time. Okay, so that's another way that we can start breaking the data down. And this is important. So what is that sub-pattern? But I'm going to go back to Alex's first statement. Do we even have a problem? Have we lost any laptops? Before we start doing all of this analysis of lost laptops by department, by type, by value, and all of this stuff. From a problem statement, do we have a problem? Yes, sir. And so actually sometimes that's how we would collect that information as far as do we have a problem, because I've been doing some work with a local municipality and it was a custodial group. And so there's no data on how good a job are we cleaning. There's no empirical data, but they use surveys as during the problem definition phase. So suggestions are important. Suggestions are what? Countermeasures. When do we talk about countermeasures? Later. and it's okay, but if we do a survey, then if there's a way we can partition that or something. Leroy. Yeah, so that could be a survey. That's data. Do we have a problem? So the point I'm trying to make, one more.
Percent of customers who have different weight intervals.
Okay. So kind of doing that histogram type thing that I had over here. So, and this kind of gets gray in here, but what we want to do, high level, do we have a problem, and get buy-in as to whether or not we have a problem. And if there's buy-in that we have a problem, now it probably makes sense to invest the time and energy to start breaking the problem down and start understanding. Some guys were talking about, is it time of the day? Is it type of department? Is it type of need? Is it, what are these experiences? That's getting into the next part. That's when we break the problem down. So start with that theme, that true north, where do we want to go? Next thing is, do we have a problem relative to that true north? And if we learn that, yeah, we do, then let's start breaking that problem down. Another thing I stole, I'm a really good steal shamelessly guy. Okay, another analogy I learned from this guy, Samuel Barra. He talks about problem solving as being analogous to a broccoli plant. And so, I'm not a big broccoli fan, but supposedly if you go out into a broccoli farm and you look at a broccoli plant and you pull off one of the big limbs of broccoli, it basically looks like the broccoli plant. That limb of broccoli is kind of a smaller version of the whole big broccoli plant. And the same thing, if you take a stick off of that, it's a smaller version of the limb or of the whole plant. And if you take a twig and supposedly all the way down to the bud, it almost looks like a broccoli plant, the big thing. So it's a form of a fractal, a self-repeating pattern. And problems are kind of like that as well. They're not exact duplicates, but if we can break it down into the smaller chunks. Since I don't like broccoli, I can handle the small little bits, but I can't do the whole plant, all right? And if we're looking at problems, maybe we can handle small little bits of the problem as opposed to fixing the whole thing at once. So let's break this problem down into manageable chunks. So we want to part the broccoli to help us figure out what we should focus on. And this is getting into the patterns that you guys were already talking about. And again, data-driven, and it sets the course. So this is on the handout that I gave you guys, the A3 handout. And if we look at this, it shows... This is kind of cool, actually. But it reads clockwise starting in the top left. And so this is for an accounts payable process. And the blue section of the pie is talking about invoices that are paid with no problem. And that little thin red sliver represents invoices that have discrepancies, which is about 245,000 at that when they took the snapshot. So I told you this is in a shared services environment. If we go to the right, they broke it down into two chunks. The first pie chart that says 59% on the left, that's looking at by quantity of invoices. The blue section was invoices with discrepancies from one location. And if you look at the pie chart on the right where it says by amount, the 70%, those are 70% of the value of past due invoices are from that one location. So, big thing, we start breaking it down. Hey, maybe it makes sense to focus on that one location. So that's 173 grand worth of past due invoices. Follow the big blue arrow down, and they start looking at invoices by discrepancies. It says discrepancies by dollars, but it's by discrepancy, and it's hard to read down. If we look at that bar chart in the middle right, that first column that's circled, the first bar of the histogram says no receiver. And then if we zero in on this, so this is, hey, that big thing on the left, that's the whole broccoli plant. Okay, these two pie charts in the top right, that's our limb of the broccoli. This bar, the histogram that says discrepancies by dollars, that's our stick of the broccoli, a smaller chunk, and it says no receiver. And then if we go into no receiver, we can actually look at, there's no receiver because of these different reasons. No confirmation remark, they had a code 22 issue, whatever that meant, and a couple other things. And it's saying, where are my biggest issues? We're not going to fix past due invoices. We're not going to fix all past due invoices in one swoop. We've got to break this problem down into chunks. And now what these guys are probably going to do is, I'm probably going to focus on those top three issues. Confirmation remarks, code 22, and this other weird code. How are we doing? Does this make sense? It's a story. It's a logical path. This is how A3s help us go through the plan, do, check, act cycle. This whole left side of the A3 is the P from the plan, do, check, act. And the whole left side of the A3 is going to take 50, 75% of your brain power and your time and your energy. And that's okay. If we do a good job here, when we get over here to countermeasures, life's going to be easy. If we've included the right people over here when we're going through the A3, life's going to be real easy over here because people know we've been working on it. They've had a voice. They understand. It's data-driven decisions. It's good stuff. Can you follow this story? Most of you aren't even in finance and you can follow this story. Okay? These guys did a really good job. Is it perfect? No. But there's good stuff here. Here's a different one. So the problem that these guys had, this was in a service environment. So again, I'm just talking about this top piece is, they call it background and importance. This is the problem statement. Actually, I want to go back. I want to go back to this. This is our problem statement on the A3 I handed out. This is the problem statement. No, it's not. Problem statement's up there written. Lots of times problem statements are pictures. People say, how can you have a picture that's a problem statement? You can do it. It's okay to have a picture that's a problem statement. Because what do they say? A picture's worth 1,000 words. So it's a really long problem statement if it's a picture. But it's okay to have a picture as a graph, something like that, as a problem statement. So, different problem. This is a service environment where folks have to go out and fix radio systems in an installed customer base. So, January through April last year, they had 2,800 on-site visits. 22% of those included issues that took at least 2 trips to resolve. Okay? Let's just stick with those 2 bullets. What they were going after was reducing, if we went to the theme, it would say 100% first time, 1 single trip problem resolution or repair or whatever it meant. Okay? So, and what's our problem? 22% of them require a second visit. How could this problem statement be better? Let's put some dollars in there or something like that. What does that mean to us as a CEO? He's like, I don't care if we go out there 22% of the time. Oh, it's 500 grand? I care. So how'd they break this down? Again, these guys kind of used a similar pattern. Don't believe that you got to have pie charts in your A3s, okay? They can help. They're one of the visual tools. It could be a process, it could be a value stream map, it could be a swim lane. But start in the top left, these guys did the same thing. So 22% required 2 visits. Go to the bar chart on the right. 373 out of those required equipment. So they had to bring something back, equipment that they didn't have in their trucks. If we go to the bottom right, we're breaking the problem down. Now I'm down to my stick of the broccoli. It said, for those that needed equipment, 206 of those needed customer approval. My Pareto, hey, maybe that's a piece of the pie I should go after. And then these over here in the bottom left, it's talking about specific type of activities or repair activities that they had to perform in order to finish the repair. They either had to saw cut concrete or they had to pull a cable underground. And so those are the 2 pieces that they're going after. That's the type of, the equipment required those type of operations. They're breaking the problem down. They're not going to eliminate all the second visits. They're going to go after the bigger pieces of the pie. And some of you guys have already done this. Start with this big problem. DMV, average wait time is XYZ. In fact, here's our data. Here's my wait time in minutes for 3 months at location AAA of the DMV. 9% less than 15 minutes, X percent, 16 to 30, 31 to 45, and so on. That looks a little different than the experience you guys have. But let's think about now. I want you guys to have some fun breaking that down. And I heard some really good ideas already on how you might break that down. So just take 2 or 3 minutes to do that. How do you break that down from this big piece to smaller pieces? This is the hard part. Yeah. All right. Thoughts. What are some different ways, and we're going to get a bunch of them here. I'm not going to write them down, but I just want to, just real quick, what are some of the different subsets that you guys talked about?
Type of service.
Type of service, okay. Do I need a license? Do I need registration? Do I need whatever it might be? Okay, good. Type of service. Time of day. Beautiful. Yes, sir. Day of the week. Wonderful.
Productivity of the employee providing the service.
Okay, productivity of the employee, like by number, how long it takes to go through each step?
People could take longer to do enough
Okay.
an opportunity to train that person to get to what you can deem as what a standard is for that service providing.
Okay. We might be starting to bleed into analysis and root cause, because that might, if different people have different experience levels, skill levels, that might be causing longer delays, and so it might be causing. So that's okay, but these are the conversations that we have. Any other patterns or subsets you guys talked about? Okay, number of people served, and that would probably be in the problem statement where we talk about X number of people per day. But it could, go ahead. Okay, good. So rush hour, time of the day. So a couple more. Robert.
Would you also not just ignore the ones that are 9% or less and just for all these categories pick the 2 heavy hitters there?
You might do that. That would be another way that we could start. That would be another way to analyze it. And
were they services that could have been done online?
so, and now we're getting into analysis.
Well, grabbing the data, because if it was, then you can, later on in the solving, figure out a way to get them not to
So,
come in.
and again, not to say right or wrong, but one of the questions as a coach, you'd be asking, okay, so are we talking about solutions? Are we talking about causes? Or are we talking about the current state?
That's actually covered type of service, because then, once you've done that, then you can, because online stuff is related to type of service.
Right. And then we'd say, okay, how come people aren't doing it online? Right. There's one more that put their hand up. Okay. Yeah.
How many staff are working?
Okay, we could look at staffing levels. And again, kind of might bleed into cause, it might, or analysis, it might. Brian, go ahead. I keep saying one more.
So I'm wondering if this is sort of hinting at cause, but it seems to be interesting. So all this breakdown you're doing for the longer wait time, it's also good for the shorter ones. Because if they have the exact same pattern for longer ones, then you might, if you didn't know that, you might come to the conclusion that, oh, it's because of this.
And so you're right, it might be hinting at cause.
You might want to look at it later.
And so one of the things that's really cool, and you got to be open to this, is that it should be iterative, because we might go to cause and that might take us back up to breaking the problem down. So there's no right or wrong answer. Actually, I think there's a good direction versus being off course. It very much can be an art. It very much can be frustrating, because we're looking for patterns and we start analyzing information. We say, ugh, there's no pattern there. We got to look at it a different way. And it's, how do we slice and dice this? And so there's no right answer. Any one of the things that you guys said may end up being the right way to break this problem down. So, I didn't teach you nothing, huh? All right. So I kind of circled these three because I'm not going to, this is actually gets into areas that I think we're more comfortable with and have kind of set the foundation with by going through the first 3 or 4 pieces of the A3. When we start talking about root cause analysis, and when we talk about analysis, one piece of that might be process mapping. One piece of that might be, where are we at? Okay, so, sorry. Goals, setting goals. I think most of us are pretty good at setting goals. Shelley did a great job of really reinforcing the point that our goals need to be measurable. What is the metric that we're measuring? Target condition, average wait time for vehicle registration reduced from 38 minutes to less than or equal to 15 minutes. That's my target condition. That's my goal. And notice, we didn't set that goal. This is specific. This is saying these guys detected some type of pattern that vehicle registration was a piece that they're going to go after. That's that sprig of broccoli, or it's the chunk of the pie that they're going to go after. They're not talking about reducing DMV weights overall. It's vehicle registration group that they're focusing on. Now we talk about analysis, and the line is, analysis is saying, let's try to explain or understand the difference between what our current state is, 38 minutes, and our target condition, 15 minutes, and start talking about what's causing that difference in performance levels. So explaining the gap. And this is where we get into classic stuff. You guys have seen this. It's 5 whys. It's fishbone diagrams, cause-effect diagrams. We can use those things to stimulate brainstorming. I'm not going to teach you guys how to do that stuff. You know that. And if you don't, check it out. There's all kinds of information out there. We can use check sheets to validate what we think we saw, or we can do other forms of data collection to validate what we think were the significant things from the cause-effect diagram or the fishbone diagram. We can use Pareto's to help visualize and make sure that we're working on the right stuff. I'm going to fly past that. This is actually a pretty cool tool. I pulled this out of Managing to Learn, which is listed in the back. It's a really, really good book on A3 thinking. But this is talking about problem analysis trees. And sometimes we do 5 why and we think there's just a single cause for each why. In reality, quite often there's multiple causes for the answer. Well, why does that happen? And so this is kind of a cool way where you can visualize the answers to the different whys. So in this one's taken right out of his book. He's talking about problems with translation. Some of those translations just took forever. He called it lost, but they just took forever to get done versus actually bad translations. And so one of the things I like to do is when we break it down. So the answer is, why do we have problems with translations? Well, some of them take forever and some of them are bad. And so we can break that down. We can say, hey, about 45% of them were actually took a long time, and 55% of them we had translation issues. Now we can ask the question, okay, so what kind of translation issues or problems did we have? Why did we have those? So the answer to that second why is, well, they couldn't understand the original. Maybe that's one of the causes, the answer to the why. Or maybe they understand the original, but it's still a bad translation. And so this kind of graphically answers or recognizes the fact that sometimes there's more than one answer to the question why. So I like using this, especially for more complex problems. Fish bones are great. What I want to point out on this, what this team did a really good job with doing, they were looking at bug-related issues in product development. What they did a really good job of doing was identifying and validating what the significant causes were after they used the fishbone diagram to brainstorm potential causes. And it's hard to see here, but they've actually got numbers inside those stars. So when they did the countermeasures, each of the big hitter causes, each of the primary causes, should have countermeasures associated with them. At least one countermeasure with each significant cause. So what these guys did is they actually created, on the A3, there's a visual connection, there's a trail, and it says whatever number that is, 4 or 1 or whatever that is. If we looked at the countermeasure, the number of the countermeasure would correspond to that cause. So once we've got root causes identified, we can down select what are the significant few, confirm that what we're looking at makes sense, we can Paretoize it or whatever. And now, finally now, where are we? We're an hour and a half into an hour and 45-minute presentation. We're 2/3 of the way through the A3, and now we can start talking about countermeasures. And not until now. Because we need to understand, is there a problem? Which piece of the problem are we going after? What's the cause of that problem? And not until we understand the cause of the problem is it responsible to say, this is what we need to do to fix the problem for complex issues. If they're simple issues, we can run experiments maybe. We can afford to, don't take this too literally, but if they're simple problems, we can shoot from the hip. Again, don't take that too literally. But for complex problems, that's probably not the responsible way to go. Yes, sir?
I mean, you don't need to do an A3 for everything.
You don't need to do an A3 for everything. No. If it's something you can knock out in a week or less or a couple weeks, I think I said earlier, 3, 4, 5 weeks, if we think it's that complex of a problem, we should probably do an A3. Or we should have some type of structure for a system for going through problem solving. And I think the A3 makes sense. It's effective. So now we can talk about countermeasures, and then we can prioritize those countermeasures. So again, a lot of work on the left side. It's about this PDSA or PDCA cycle. We talk about countermeasures. I say no solutions. What's wrong with the word solution? It sounds permanent. And it sounds like we got the solution designed, we got it figured out, toss it over the wall, you guys deal with it. And in reality, there will always be unintended consequences. Some of them small, some of them big. But we got to keep our eyes open for them. We can't toss this thing over the wall. We talk about countermeasures because it may not take us all the way there. Things change. Okay? So we want to address each of the significant root causes. We want to get buy-in, and we want to talk about this set-based approach. And the set-based approach says you can't come up with one single countermeasure for a problem. Let's see if there's 2 or 3 different countermeasures, and let's do some quick testing. There's a whole story and conversation around that. But this set-based approach to either product design or problem solving can be an incredibly eye-opening thing. If we've got to come up with 3 different ideas, it forces us to test each of them. And it starts taking the subjectivity away from, is it Mike's solution, is it Max's solution, is it Fred's solution? And if you start looking at how are we going to evaluate them, and let's measure and evaluate based on how well did it do. So we can prioritize. There's different ways that we can prioritize improvement activities or ideas. This is real simple, just looking at benefit versus ease of execution. There's some other more appropriate models that start looking at cost and time to implement and effectiveness and things like that. So there's different ways to evaluate, but the idea is have a system in place to evaluate your solution. Okay? So finally, 7 and 8. Let's make sure this thing works. And let's ask the question. We had a hypothesis. That was our experiment. Okay? And then finally, the 8th, I almost said the 8th discipline. We talked about 8 Ds and stuff like that. But the 8th step in the A3 process is looking at, can we apply this stuff to other parts of the business? So that's really, I'm not going to do this, but this is a really important thing to think about. Because of time, I'm not going to do it. But an important thing to think about is, if this is going to work, what are the enablers? And a lot of it comes to changing our mindsets as far as, do we really need a quick fix tomorrow? Or is it better to invest the time and energy and find out if there's a better fix? It might take 5 weeks to get a more permanent or long-lasting countermeasure. Steve, 2 days ago you did an online webinar and you were talking about the action boards. And your analogy at the end, it wasn't even an analogy, your story about the palm tree was fantastic. I loved it. Steve talked about, we've got all these problems, and I'll probably butcher it, but give me a chance, all right? In the business context, we've got all of these problems. Take the time to get to root cause and to permanently or effectively address problems. And the story Steve told was about a neighbor whose palm tree was on fire. And he's out there with his hose, and he's trying to knock the fire down, and he's trying to put the fire out. I mean, that's normal, right? And a volunteer fireman drove by and said, that palm tree's gone. What you need to be focusing on is protecting the other trees. And I love that, because we need to find that balance. So thank you for that's stealing shamelessly, all right? But thank you, sir. So think about, what is it that needs to be in place, and a lot of it is patience, persistence, and developing your people. The cool thing is, if you move away from managers, supervisors, key staff people, engineers fixing your problems, and you spread that learning of how to go about effectively solving problems, you've increased the bandwidth, you've increased the capacity of the organization to solve problems. And the more you practice it, the easier it becomes. And what might take an A3 to walk through this year, maybe you can walk through informally or a little less structured in the future. So I hope this opened your guys' eyes open to some of this stuff. I wanted to talk about what this thing was, how it can be used as a management employee development program, how it's different than how we've traditionally approached problems, and talk about some of the benefits. And I hope you guys got something out of this. Great resources here. I showed you some stuff from Managing to Learn. There's another one by Durwood Sobek and Art Smalley called Understanding A3 Thinking. And then when you get into visual representation of information, these last 2 sources are really, really good. Back of the napkin and visual display of quantitative information. So thanks, you guys. Enjoy the conference. I hope you walk away from here with a couple nuggets. And I think that, walk away from the conference with a couple nuggets of learning, and I hope that makes it worth it for you.